Hello everybody, I'm Nurgleprobe and welcome to this video, my first HexTCG video that is just not like gameplay from the stream that I do sometimes, like every day almost, kinda-ish. Anyway, we're gonna talk about the next set that's coming out. When I'm recording this, it's about 4 hours left until the actual release of the set, which is really exciting. Everybody's looking forward to it. It marks the rotation of gems, which is exciting because maybe a certain bunny won't be as good as it is right now. And it also is just a completely game changer, really, with the gem rotation, new cards. Everything is going to be interesting and constructed for a while. I mean, I haven't played the game for a very long time myself, but I'm definitely looking into drafting and playing limited with a new set and getting some cards that nobody really knows how good they will do in constructed, because constructed is really my favorite format, but it's kind of hard to get into with a lot of the good cards being expensive. But anyway, today we're going to talk about my top 10 cards. So let's move on to that, shall we? So before moving on to the actual top 10 list, I thought I would mention a few cards that just didn't make the cut. They were close, but they weren't quite as fun or good as the ones that I listed in my top 10. Of course, there's also a lot of commons and uncommons and such that are super interesting and I think will be great for constructed, just not at the power level of these cards that I'm mentioning today. So some of these might not be as good as some of the commons either. We don't know. I mean, some cards are just 4-offs in any deck, right? But let's move on, shall we? So these cards are not listed in any specific order. They're just cards that that missed the list. So let's start with Heart of Embers. Heart of Embers, turn all your Valors into a 1-mana, 3-damage spell without any threshold requirement, okay? But obviously you already have some thresholds since you play these cards, and it is a 4-mana cost card, so probably you have thresholds unless you play a super weird deck. Let's not go into that. But it just looks like a super good card. It's one of those drops, if you drop them late game, if you gathered some Valors, that's a lot of damage for 1 or 2 turns. That's just gonna hit your opponent in the face. And there's a lot of cards in the new set, well, obviously in the new set, that creates these Valors. There's even a champion that creates a banner that gives you a Valor every turn, which is a super strong card, I think. But anyway, I looked at it, I thought about it, and maybe it is too gimmicky. Maybe you're just aggressive enough with the new cards and the cards that already exist anyway that you don't actually need to play this. It might be good in certain matchups, I don't know, but it's a super good card nonetheless. And in draft, in limited, Tavish, Construct Guild Boss. There's one thing that pulled this off from my top 10 into my bottom after 10. That's a thing, right? That's a thing now. So the reason Tavish is on the list is because, or not on the list, is because I think he is too specific in his tap requirements. When I first read him, I thought he said Underworld Troops and Artifacts. And if he could just tap Artifacts for his effect, I think he would have been super strong in a card that you should look out for. But it says that he needs to tap Robots, what changes things a little bit, because then you can't really sheet out more artifacts with them. Well, you can, but they need to be robots, and then those robots need to be tapped, and it's just not as good as I thought it was to begin with, because if it was artifacts, you could have built it like a very interesting control deck around him. But now I think it's just too specific with robots. I don't know. They won't change it either, because all the card changes have been done already. Maybe he will see play in some fun deck, I hope. I would love to play him. I mean, look at him. He looks amazing. So the next card is Osava's Wish. This is one of the most proper and best reanimate effects that we've gotten in this game, I believe, in Hex in general, for a long time, or ever. I don't think there's any other good effects like this, especially not as a quick action. So first of all, it returns troops, constants, and artifacts, which means you can play any kind of interesting deck and still use this to get those things back, which is really good. Even Shant might use this, right, to get their constants back, which is super interesting, and they trigger everything. It seems good. But not only that, you can use it as a combat trick, you can use it to get triggers again. If you lower the cost on something that's a bit bigger, you can bring that back, especially a 5-cost card then, because if you lower it with the 2 and so on. It just seems super good and super versatile, and I'm just interested to see where this goes. The fact that it's a diamond card might mean that it goes into the aggro decks, bring back Rowan and so on, I don't know. it's just one of those cards that will be good when it's good, right? When it's good, it's super good. So definitely a card to look out for. So the next card is Blamesmith. This card, the more I look at it, the more I'm impressed, and the more I wonder, why is this not in my top 10 again? But obviously it's because at worst it's a 2/2 for 2 with a gem in it, minor gem. But even that is like, that's fine for a minor gem creature to be a 2/2 for 2. But the fact that it's so versatile in what it does. First of all, you can use any minor gem, obviously, to give it something cool. If you're just mono red, you can give it a Valor, or you can give it Swift Strike. A 2/2 Swift Strike for 2. That's pretty good already. Even a Valor for 2 is pretty good at that point. Then you can mix it with Heart of Embers, though, like I mentioned before, right? Yeah, so not only is it a 2/2 for 2, you can also Scrounge for 3, which means, if you don't know, void 3 troops from your discard pile when you play it. And it gets +3/+3, which means it's a 5/5 for 2 with Swift Strike. Or with a well, I'd rather have a Swift Strike at that point. But that is just super good. You can also give it speed if you play Blood Ruby, which is also pretty good. A 5/5 speed. I'd play that. And when it dies, it creates a Blamsack. And everybody hates Blamsack, obviously. It's a 5-cost artifact that deals, I think it's 3 or 5 damage to your opponent at the end of your turn, and as soon as you take damage, it disappears. Or gets destroyed, or something like that. That card is not so good in itself, but when you have a 5/5 running into your opponent, and they have to handle it, and if they can't, it deals 5 damage, and then they can handle it, but then you get a Blamsack, so they still take damage. It's like, man, this card... And that is a 2-mana card. So the next card is Rissix. I'm not going to talk about this too much. It's a 3-mana 4/4 unblockable. You need 3 cards in a discard pile to play it, or in a crypt, sorry. And it's unique. It's a 4/4 unblockable. I'm just leaving that there. And if you're playing control colors, so control everything, play this, attack for a few times, and it's just... Man. Dread Technomancer is also a card that I love. It's a 6/6 for 1. Well, actually, it's a 1/1 for 1, but it could be a 6/6 for 1 if you have some artifacts in your crypt. And the reason it's not in top 10 is because it's a bit too specific, maybe, to be good. Probably there will be a deck that uses this in some awesome way, and it's just going to be bananas, and you're going to look at it and get like, oh my god, what's going on? It's a 1-mana huge guy, and you can play that and still counterspell. It's just, The next card is maybe the most surprising to miss the top 10, and that is Alderath something Glory. Nail that one. So on the PTR for this game, the public test servers that they had for Herofall, this card was actually a 6-resource cost card, which was a bit too expensive for being a control-ish kind of card that you want to play to remove early threats, but they changed it to a 5-cost card, and I feel like this is good now. I'm comparing it a lot to the Croc, right? Because that is a 5-cost card that deals with some troops, and obviously bigger ones, but I feel like this one can fill a very similar role in different decks, and it also voids the cards. And voiding cards is so good in this game. When you copy them, you get extra copies of that card and so on. So voiding might be a super important thing, even if you just sideboard it against certain decks. But now, we're ready for the top 10. Number 10. So my number 10 is of course the cover card of the set, Herofall. Herofall is just one of those cards that when I first saw it, I was super excited. Then I thought about it, not as excited. Then I thought about it some more, and I was even more excited about this card because it is a super good card in control decks. Let me tell you why. First of all, it voids all the troops that are annoying in your matchup or in your current matchup from their deck and from their hand. And that second part, from their hand, is really the most important one. The one that goes to the crypt is not removed, but it's in the crypt, so if they don't have any way of returning it, it's still gone, right? But the fact that it's removing cards from hands, possibly, it's just insane tempo advantage to you. So if you play it, you kill something, that's a 1-for-1, that's a fair trade already. But if they also have one in card that they have to void, that is a 1-for-2. 1-for-2 cards are generally super good. That is why Croc is super good. I mean, it's also removal and it's controlling the board, obviously, and it stays there. But killing something, it's also quick action. So killing something at the end of their turn, removing a card from their hand, and then you draw a card, it's It's super good. So, number 9? My number 9 might not be the most super exciting card in the set, but it's definitely one of those cards that will be sideboarded in every deck. Every deck that plays Diamond. Unless it stops you, of course. But, look at it. It is Purify. Purify is a card that, first of all, it removes all spider eggs. And that just makes me happy inside. To have a proper counter against that, I mean, spiders were never really super strong anyway, but the fact that you can now remove tarantula eggs as well with it, it's one of those cards that it's so good. And it reverts all cards in all decks. Prophecy decks, beware, okay? You might have a super cool combo, you're building it up inside your deck or drawing into it and so on and so on. I play this and it's like, well, you don't really have it in your deck anymore now, do you? Do you? Winter Moon, what are you gonna do now? Well, I guess you just keep drawing and you do it again and again and again and again. Worst case, if you main deck this and you're playing against a matchup where it doesn't matter, you can use it at the end to draw a card. It replaces itself for 2 resources. I'd say that is fine. If it didn't do that, not as good, but since it does that, I mean, when it's a good hit against your matchup and drawing you a card, it's good. It's good, okay? Put this in your reserves and be happy. Did I say sideboard at any point? I probably did. Sorry. Number 8. My number 8 might not be the most super exciting card. Obviously, we already talked about Purify, which is the most exciting card, and that's why it was number 9. My number 8 is Clash of Steel. And this, I know a lot of players are not super excited about this card because they're like, it's not a super good removal. It doesn't really remove the card that I want to remove, and that is true. It is a very specific kind of card, but if they play a deck that plays a lot of things, and it doesn't have to be troops, that is also why it's super good. Just imagine them having 5 cards on the board. 5 cards is reasonable thought, right? And then you play, well, you don't actually have to play anything. You can just, well, if you have anything, it doesn't really matter. Let's say you have one thing. You play this, it's a 1 card for 4 cards. He loses 4 cards, you lose 1. I'd say that even if you don't remove the super most important card that he has on the board, I'd say it's still pretty darn good. And the fact is that it voids all other things, which will be super important in a matchup against a certain card that I will talk about soon. So my number 8, Clash of Steel. Number 7. So as I just mentioned, Clash of Steel will kind of counter a card, and that is the card that we're just about to mention. And let's see if I can pronounce it correctly. My number 7, Melanth the Lifebinder. This card is just super good. At first it wasn't actually on my top 10 because I was like, oh, it's a dragon, whatever, it's green white, whatever. But the more I thought about it, the Lifebound ability is just super good. So everything with Lifebound, everything else gets Lifebound when you play this. When your Lifebound creatures has gone to the discard pile, or crypt, at the end or the beginning of your turn, I don't remember exactly when it was, as long as you have a Lifebound creature or troop, Magic the Gathering terms, damn you, on the board, those troops will come back to the board. So 3 Lifebound, 2 of them die, the other 2 will return. That is super strong, but if you play Clash of Steel against it, he will pick one of them, or your opponent will pick one of them, and the other 2 will just disappear. Okay, so it doesn't really work very well against that, does it? So Clash of Steel is super good against that. And it's a 6 cost card, which means it's kind of fairly costed for what it does. And maybe I'm overhyping it when I'm thinking about it, but it just seems like you can do a lot of crazy things with it. I mean, you don't have to worry about your opponent killing those things. You can even do this or use it to do your own combos. Sacrifice your things to do things. They come back, you can sacrifice them again. It's just, there's a lot of things here to be done. And I think it's a super good card. Let's see how well it will play out in Constructed. Number 6. So my number 6 is Matriarch of Flame. This is just a super good card. Early game, it's a 3/3 aggro card that grows every turn. Oh, not every turn. If you get a threshold every turn. And in the late game, it's a 3/3 haste that gets your burn spells. So it means that you don't run out of resources in your aggressive decks. Because that is usually what happens, right? You burn your opponent's face, you burn it, you burn it, you burn it. You get them down to 2 HP and you're like, I'm out of cards, and they are starting to gain life. damn you, and then you're like, I can't do anything now because all my spells will not do enough damage, and if I gather a lot of spells, they're still getting more health. But this card fixes that ish. That and the fact that you play it, you do 3 damage, and then you get a burn spell that is pretty good for those kinds of situations. And it also grows, of course, but I guess not as much in the end game because you're not drawing as many shards at that point. But still, it gives you more versatility in the late game. I just love it. It gives you extra card too, which means value, and value is always good. Number 5. My number 5, the opposite element of my number 6, is Empress of Ice. It's a super good 2/4 flyer for 3. Yeah, if I just stop there, a 2/4 flyer for 3, okay, I guess. But what's its ability? That's a pretty good body already, right? Then it has the ability that every time you play a resource in Sapphire, that is a semi-removal. It taps your opponent, you can be aggressive with it, and that would be a good card in itself. A rare card, probably. But now, it has also this awesome threshold ability that stops your opponent's cards, not only troops, cards, from readying in the beginning of their turn. Excuse me? This is just super good, strong in Sapphire. I can just imagine this is really the ultimate draw-go card for Sapphire. You can play this, you draw your card, you play your resource, you tap something, you can attack because they probably only have 1 or 2 creatures out and you're probably tapping them. And that is just great because then you can have your counter magic up, and what are they going to do against it? It's just insane. And it's not a unique troop either, which means that you can play several of them. If they handle 1, you'll still have the others to keep your opponent's cards tapped. It is just good. It's just good. It's just good. It's just good. Super good. Number 4. Is that an owl sound? I don't know if that was an owl sound. So my number 4 might be a card that you're gonna look at and you're like, well, that just ruined your whole list, Nurgleprobe, really. Compared to the cards you just mentioned, no. But now my number 4 is Silver Talon, adjudicator, however you say that word. And you might be like, what? How is that stronger than the 2 cards you just mentioned? Well, it might not be stronger in itself, but the utility of this card is just kind of bananas. First of all, it's a 3/2 flyer for 4. It's not great. That is not the best stats. A 2/4 for 3 is better. But the fact that it enters the field, and if you have less health than your opponent, you get 5 health. 5 health is a huge amount against certain burns. Against Yodel, 5 is probably another turn for you. And if you have less cards in your hand than your opponent, you draw 2 cards. And in certain matchups, there's 2 really different sides of this card. One where you gain health against certain decks, and that will be super good, and against others you will draw cards, and that will be super good. And when you get both, that is just so much value in this card. And having it on the board is a thing that can block, it can attack, it can be aggressive, and if they have to waste a card to handle it when you've gotten both triggers, oh my lord, that's just such an insane amount of value. And it's just one of those cards that it will see play, it will be a valuable card, and when it does its thing, it's gonna be super good. Though I believe that a lot of players will misplay this, and maybe wait too long to play it. Instead of a 3/2 flying body, they will be like, well, I need to get the value out of it, so I'm not gonna play it. Which is probably not correct. It's better to just play it, and, you know. Sometimes it might be correct, of course it depends on the game and the matchup and so on. But, super good card. Super versatile, and I love value. Value is super important, so this is it's an owl with value on it. I think it's an owl. Yeah, it's an owl. Right. Yeah. Oh, it says bird, I guess, but an owl is a bird. Right. Number 3. So my number 3 is probably the most talked about card in the set. Well, one of them anyway. And that is Reginald's Riposte. I think that's how you say it. And this card is just so good. It's just so good. It's so good. It's a Ruby counterspell for the first thing. Okay, it's super good. So Ruby Sapphire control might be a super good thing in the next format. But it stops an action, and you get that action, and you change the thresholds to Ruby. So, and at the end of the turn, man, a lot of people have been complaining about this, that they changed it so that if you can't play it, the opponent get that card back. And they're like, well, it's not going to be worth countering cards if they get it back. But why did you counter that card? Just imagine if you play a card, let's just give a very simple example. You play a card that says draw 4 cards. It doesn't exist, but let's say we did. Draw 4 cards. Your opponent plays, I'm countering that. You say, I counter that. So you get that card that he owns to your hand for the time being. Reginald is gone, but it replaced itself basically. And then you get those 4 cards. Was it worth getting those 4 cards, even though your opponent might get that counter magic back? Probably. It's all about handling your value and stopping your opponent from stopping you, right? So even just stopping extinction. You're attacking with several troops on his turn. He is, you have lethal on board and everything. It's super close to a win. He plays extinction with his 4 resources, and that's it. That's all he has. And you go like, nope, that is mine now. And if you win next turn, it doesn't matter if he gets it back, because he won't get it back because you win. So it's super good because it's an aggressive color, and having this in an aggressive color, I feel like in the mirror match it will be super bananas because you can get the burn spell against other control decks. Once they actually play one of their bigger controlling cards, you get that and you can play it against them, or just play it to waste it, that kind of thing. It's just super good. It's a lot of value in there. And if you take something that you can use against them, I mean, that is just laughing in their face. Super good card. Mr. Reginald. It will be very, very fun to play with it. I'm looking forward to it. Maybe even with Tavish. Probably not, though. Number 2. So, my number 2 is the card that has gotten me most excited about the set. Reginald's Riposte was one of those. What else? Tavish is really a card that I just love, but obviously I won't be able to play that probably. But my number 2 is Darkheart of Nulsan. And this card, the more I look at it, and the more I think about its cost, and the fact that it has 2 sockets, and the fact that it forces opponents to sacrifice, or both of you rather, to sacrifice non-socketed things. Oh my lord, it's just super good. It's just so good, and you can play it in any deck. Any deck can play this card. I mean, obviously there might be some aggro decks. Well, no, wait. Then you just give it speed. Oh, it's just so good. Thank God that we don't have the old gems when this comes out, and we get the new ones. That makes it a bit more balanced. But having that ability mixed with 2 sockets for this cost, it will see play. It will be a deck. I bet there will be a socket deck, the Nulsan artifact kind of aggro-ish deck or control-ish deck. It should be a thing. And even if it's not, playing this in a control deck against your opponent is just... There's so many things in this card that is great. And all the gems make it so versatile and awesome. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to playing this. Not to play against it so much, but to play it will be super fun. And remember, when you go into reserves, you can actually change the socketed things. So if you play this in, like, let's say Usu with 5 colors, you can just change it to whatever it needs to be for the next matchup. And that is super good. And also, if you play the other socketed things with the new socketed support, you can change everything into things that you need for a certain matchup. Yeah. Oh my god. Okay, Darkheart, I'll see you on the board. I'll see you in the constructed games, I bet. Number 1. So my number 1, no big surprise there. It's Dreamweaver Ancient. This card is just so much value. You play it on turn 5, probably earlier because you play Wild. And also listen, on the PTR this was actually a 4 resource cost card, which was a bit too good, so they made it a 5 cost card, thank god. But still super good for what it is. You play this on turn 5 or 4. It's a 4/3 crush, speed. You can just wait for when they don't have anything super important or no resources active, and you play this, you attack. You get another card, and even now, if they handle it, you've already gotten value from it. You've already gotten another card from it. So, and if they can't handle it on their next turn, oh my lord. Did you just get value 2 turns in a row? I mean, they might have a blocker, but even then, even if they have a blocker that kills it, let's say it's a 3/3, you still get a card that's a 1 mana card, or 1 resource card. And you can play another one next turn too. It's not a unique troop either, which means that you can play, you know, second one next turn. If you have 2 on the board that they can't handle, I think it's GG at that point. I mean, obviously if they kill everything, maybe. This card is just insane. It's gonna go into, I think every single wild deck will play this. Maybe not 4 copies, but close. It is the grab card to get. If you play draft and if you see this and it's like, oh, it's not really in my colors for this draft, you just pick it. You just pick it. And even in that draft, maybe you'll change to wild just so you can play that. Because in draft, it's also insane and limited in general. It's a super strong card. It creates insane amount of value if your opponent can't handle it even more. It's a great card. So that was my top 10 cards. Do you agree with the cards that I put on the list and the cards that almost made it onto the list? Is there a card that I missed? Might have missed some card. Or is there a card that you think should be removed from the list and replaced? Let me know in the comments. Hope you enjoyed. And I'll see you out there in the constructed ladder. Hopefully playing some awesome new cards and awesome new decks with the Herofall set coming out in about 3 hours. Man, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be exciting. I'll see you out there, everybody. Bye-bye.